Welcome and excited to be here. Welcome to our panel, Alternative Advanced Style, J-Fashion Aunties Speak Up. This presentation is going to actually have three parts to it. The first one will be my part. I'll be discussing themes of aging in fashion and ageism in general. And that'll be like the activist part. That'll be the inciting you to riot part. So second, Ariel will be describing the impact that a longer, more historic view of fashion has had on her particular view of J fashion style. And third, Rambo Bright will be discussing their own take on aging in fashion and the icons that they admire who have contributed to their style. So totally excited about this. And I feel like we've been planning it forever. And I'm just so glad to be here with all of you guys. All right, so who are we? I am Acha. On Instagram, I am Auntie Kuro. I am 48 years old and I'm biracial. My mom is Thai. I have one kid and I consider myself actually a relative newbie in Lolita fashion. I've only really been investing in the clothes for 2 years, but I've loved the style for about 15 years. So I'm a federal civil servant. So as you can imagine, that kind of puts a constraint on my wardrobe a little bit. And now, Ariel?
Hi, I'm Ariel. I'm also 48. I have 2 kiddos. I'm a professional writer and an academic, and I wear mostly Dolly K, Maury, and Natural K, and mostly made out of secondhand, vintage, and folk wear. And I'll talk a lot more about all those things later. And on Instagram, I'm Diamond Star Halo, and if you know what that refers to, you can shout it out in the chat.
I'm Rambo Bright in my early 50s. In many styles, but mostly Gothic and Classic. During the day, I'm a senior security engineer for a Fortune 50 company. In spare time, I'll dungeon master, belly dance, do a few other interesting things. I've been in the fashion for about 7 years and been having a fun time recently mentoring new people into it. With Joelle of Fluffy Tory and Kawaii Joe fame, we've done some fun things together, such as doing the lyrics to Action Lolita.
Very cool. All right, so aging. So what do we mean by aging and being old? Well, this is an incredibly inclusive panel because guess what? We are all aging, even right now. So I wanted to show this chart in particular because I wanted to show that different cultures have different age definitions for being old or considering someone old. And I pulled out this table because I thought it would be interesting to show people that much like beauty standards or other kinds of social norms, what's considered old and aging is also incredibly different if you look at it throughout time and across different cultures. So you can see here that there's a wide variety of ages for what's considered the mark of officially being old. So like in historic Britain, being old was 59, but nowadays it's 70. And in contemporary India, for example, it's 58. Whereas in America, it's like 71 for men and 73 for women. So as you can tell, like being old is actually a very culturally situated idea. Like, when are you old? Well, that depends. So the point of this slide is essentially to show that a lot of issues impact cultural perceptions of the human body. Like biologically, we all age, but the perception of how old we are changes as you move through different spaces. I'm going to talk too fast, but that's okay. I love you all. All right. So in particular, and by the way, this is Shimizu Yuko, the creator for Hello Kitty, here in our example photos. What is ageism? Now, ageism is actually any kind of bias that's based on age. So it refers to like negative discriminatory practices against old people or people in their middle years or even teenagers and children. And so in fashion in particular, And for companies that create fashion, there has for a long time been very little effort to be inclusive of ages and representation. So if you were to open up a random website for fashion, their models would probably fall in the 16 to 25 range. Like it would have to be a specific brand to go outside of that range. So for example, I don't know, it would have to be like something where your brain pings like, oh, this is for the old people, for them to be shown on the website. And it would have like lots of like schmatas. Anyway,
Eileen Fisher.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So, so here's a quote from High Snobiety that I pulled for everybody. So we have long been programmed to believe that youth and beauty are synonymous. But this fetishization has enabled the exploitation of young models and actually contributes to the erasure of older people in particular, despite their spending power. So people over 50 just get lumped together rather than brands recognizing the huge diversity among them. Older people today are active, vibrant, modern, and they're increasingly embracing and celebrating their age. It's no longer about aspiring to be younger, but aspiring to be the best version of yourself today. After all, you can't age backwards. Whoops, I skipped a slide. There we go. So, of course, we are interested in this question. Does ageism exist in J fashion communities? So, I guess starting historically, a lot of subculture fashion in Japan began as youth movements. So it was considered specifically the domain of youth to wear these clothes. So to break down a few things, you can see from my image, there's the maiden, the mother, and the crone. Those are kind of Western ideals or man, word not coming to old person brain. But anyway, so tropes, there we go. So we have these three tropes, the maiden, the mother, and the crone. And the idea of the maiden in particular plays into a lot of J fashion. So for example, otomeke translates literally to maiden-like. And Lolita, the term Lolita, is a term that refers to youthful maiden. So what are the implications of these definitions in particular? And what are the implications of these definitions to how you age in this fashion? Does it mean that the goal of the fashion is to look younger or focus on youthfulness or kind of be eternally this trope of the maiden rather than, the mother or the crone? I pulled this interesting 2013 article written by a graduate student, Isaac Gagne, who's a European man who kind of went and interviewed a bunch of people in Harajuku. And here's an interesting quote that he pulled from one of his participants in the study. So the spirit of being a princess, of being Lolita, resonates with the literary concept of shoujo, or young girl, and within the genre of shoujo literature or shoujo manga. So the shoujo concept is the ideal of the young innocent girl who's in a liminal period between childhood and adulthood. So literally, this is someone from the Japanese Lolita culture who's describing Lolita as like, yes, it's young innocent girl, maiden in this liminal period. So what do we do about that? So we'll leave that question there for a second and go back to kind of the world in general. Luckily for us, anti-aging is currently considered out. Like, we're now in a moment where worldwide, there's a lot of conscious discussion of age and also age inclusion in fashion. However, one important factor is that although people no longer say, oh, don't be old, don't age, there's still this implication that we have to look young. Like you can be as old as you want to as long as you look 25. So yeah, that's not possible. So what can we do to combat these messages in particular and be truly inclusive of aging and being old and looking like your best self, whatever your age, ability, or appearance might be? And this quote from Vox is interesting. Like, we're now in a moment where women are told, you know, it's fine to be old, but the industry is still selling things like, you know, pore reducers and wrinkle plumpers and, you know, hair dyes and things that hide the visible signs of age. Like, there's, you know, you just like, you can be old, just, you know, make sure you're not wrinkled or have gray hair. This image in particular is for my friend, the rotund Marianne Kirby. This is Queen Liliuokalani of Hawaii, and that's where I grew up. So she's a huge icon there, and I just love her style. So shout out to Hawaii and my childhood. All right. So what's nice about our current world population in general is that due to a variety of factors, we're living longer. And that means that we're also in fashion longer. It means that we have this whole lifespan in order that we can have expressing ourselves through our fashion. So there's a Guardian article that says essentially people want to see in advertising nowadays and in fashion in general themselves represented. Age and the visible signs of age, wrinkles, are not the turnoff that they used to be. So over the last 30 years, we've seen very cool people who used to be young get old, especially in the fashion. Some are ageless vampires like Mana-sama, but that's another story. But anyway, you can be older now and still be cool and relevant. And so for J fashion, there's also a trend toward inclusiveness as well. Originally, there might have been, excuse me, expectations of youth or looking very youthful while wearing J fashion, but increasingly there's less ageism as the designers and the people who began the subculture get old. Like, again, everyone is traveling through time. We're all getting old, and we've all ended up here. Someone posted on Ruffle Chat recently on Facebook, is it okay to wear a Lolita as you age, as you get older? And there are some awesome quotes that people threw in here, like, I'm 50, and though I have a mix of various Lolita styles from goth to classic to princess and sweet, sweet is still my favorite and most common in my wardrobe. I just love the pastels. Age is just a number. Don't let it define you being you. So I think that's kind of the direction of our panel in general. And so it's wonderful that people in the J fashion community have gotten there. And then I think you do well in doing what you want and dress what you like. I'm also 45 years old and in love with the sweet Lolita style. There is nothing to be ashamed of. Indeed, it is necessary to be proud and let everyone know the art and elegance of Lolita style. P.S. I am a boy. And now feeling like you are too old for bright colors and cute things is probably coming from the societal expectation that adults have to wear more subdued colors. That's fine with me. I just wear black. But you know, the more older wearers of Lolita fashion dress in a sweet style, the more that expectation will be challenged. So I think that's all very cool. And so to get back to our panel and the name of it, this visibility is very important, like inclusion and having these voices come out and say that it's okay to age in Lolita, it's okay to show your age and be happy with who you are. That's all incredibly important to combat all of those voices out there that are trying to tell us that in order to wear fashion, to wear clothes, to be part of society, you must look somewhere between, you know, 16 and 30. And you can get old, but you can't look old. So Ari Seth Cohen started the Advanced Style blog back in 2008, and he was one of the first blogs to really popularize showing old people being and looking old while still engaging in life and being vibrant and using their own kind of fashion. So his work is combating ageism by normalizing looking at people who are old and appear old, and centers on the philosophy that style is about listening to yourself and doing what makes you feel joyful. So pretty cool. And as far as wearing age-appropriate clothing goes, do we have to wear age-appropriate clothing? No. And when we talk about aging, we really mean moving through a space where we as humans, all of us, need to negotiate all kinds of different demands that just change as you age, and sometimes increase and sometimes decrease. But like there's demands on our bodies like disease, and like for me, like buying progressive glasses or whatever it is. Parenthood, there are demands on our time, like working full time, working at a place where I wear like the polo shirt and the khaki pants, and like family commitments, and also there are constraints on our money. Like all of my spare money is going to either my kids' college fund or the car they inevitably need to buy, or my mortgage. So that's like the realities of me going through time and being where I am, is I have these constraints. So, but real talk, how can we truly commit to J fashion in spite of going through these changes to our lives and our circumstances? How do we, as people who age in the fashion, how do we do it? What stereotypes do we fight in our own heads or in the world when approaching the fashion? And when is it appropriate or inappropriate to wear it? I think that each one of us is trying to answer that every day, and each one of us has their own answers. And next we're just going to discuss a little bit about how individually we address it. So me very briefly, and then over to Ariel and to Matt. So how do I do it? I am extremely shy, and also like I have a lot going on work-wise. So I either dress up my dress form when I really want to stare at something Lolita while dressed in a boring fashion, or I dress up and take pictures in front of the bookshelves behind me, or I occasionally go out in a crowd or a group or to this goth shop that I love in town called Prometheus Esoterica. And I generally try to focus on where I feel most comfortable wearing the fashion. And that's where I wear it at present. So those are some of my answers personally. Again, like strength in numbers. Also, Florida tends to be extremely warm. So like right now, I have bare feet because it's warm. Okay, and now, thank you guys for listening to me for so long. I love you all. Here's Ariel.
Hey. So one of the things that I think about a lot is I'm in perimenopause, and I keep hearing about, and for several years I've been hearing about how women in perimenopause and later feel invisible, are treated as invisible. In the world, a recent study in the UK said that 41% of women going through menopause feel lonely, invisible, irrelevant, and dispensable. And my feeling about, I mean, I know it's true. I'm not saying it's not true, but I will just say that as I've gotten older women who are older than me, people who are older than me, anyone dressed fabulously who looks my age or older is who I'm looking at in the world. That's exactly where my eye is tuned. So that to me proves that they're not invisible, because I'm looking at them and I'm seeing them. And part of why I dress the way I do is because it pretty much guarantees that I'm going to be seen. I was just walking up the street to bring dinner home to my family tonight, and a woman probably about my age was in her parked car, and she honked, and I looked in, I was like, do I know you? And she just kind of made these hand gestures at me like, I love what you're wearing. So yeah, I take a lot of time to make sure that I'm acknowledging older people who look fabulous out in the world. I always remember to compliment them, and I hear it too. These are 4 Instagram folks that I follow and adore. who are all older than me and who I find incredibly inspiring. And as you can see, none of them are remotely invisible. This is a few of my recent things that I've put together, and I've started using this hashtag Old West Toddler. I'll talk more about that later, but basically, you know, since I was little, which was in the 70s, so I'm going to talk about the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is when I grew up. There were all these different cultural factors that were intersecting to conspire to allow me to flourish in my love of petticoats, big hairbows, bloomers, pinafores, button boots, aprons, etc., which all, of course, show up in J fashion. And I'm so glad to find my way back to that. But since I was like a little kid in the 70s, that's sort of what I've been obsessed with, and it's carried through. So Old West Toddlers is how I'm talking about that. And I find it's a way to dress for comfort. As well as for my career, I'm lucky to be a creative. I work in marketing and also in creative writing and as a professor. And so I'm, you know, seen as artsy, and I pretty much get to look as eccentric as I want.
Rambo?
Yeah, so it's been a long journey for me, starting in around high school when I knew that like Asha said, the boring uniform of shirt and pants just wouldn't do it. The difficulty comes in an environment that really doesn't allow one to experiment with that, to go that way. A very uncomfortable high school environment, I should say. Thinking about the people who were there when I was writing this, even though I was in drama club and kind of the edgy side of the groups that were there, there's maybe one person who really pushed the edge of fashion, named Maya. I would not consider doing anything like this. There were kids who got beat up for listening to Prince in the high school I went to back in the 80s. Where I am now is with the perspective of age and the more of the attitude of knowing who I am, the confidence that has built over the years, a little bit of not caring as much what other people think. The peers that I have surrounded myself with, my selection of friends rather than the people who I'm kind of forced into in the school environment, all help to create a more safe space, so to speak, to allow me to choose what I wear. Certainly the communities, both online and in person, make a big difference. When I started with the Central Florida Lolita Society in late 2014, and many people in the communities have this story, your first cord tends to be pretty tragic unless you've had some coaching. I didn't have a lot of experience then. What I wore, I just found the picture was pretty rancid, but everybody was polite, kind, helpful, steered me in the right direction, and 7 years later, here I am. Hooray. Also with age comes more relatively disposable income. I'm in a pretty good position in terms of career, family, and so forth, so I can blow money on brand if I choose to. It's certainly not something I would have been able to do back in college, for sure. I also think that there's a chance, not quite a midlife crisis, but rather a second childhood opportunity here. It's something that, having talked about this with my mother, it's the kind of thing that could have been present had the environment, the neighborhood and everything been more accepting and not as much of an issue now. There's a wonderful Facebook group called Boys Can Be Princesses too. And seeing children today being able to express this is remarkable and very heartwarming. And also, as one ages, you have the perspective and history so that what you wear has become a personal story. Over the last almost decade in the fashion, wearing something carries with it the personal experience of it, such as when I pull out honey cake, it's, oh, I got this for a bargain on Lace Market. Or when I wear a certain cord, it has what happened when we were at Disney Springs with it, and those people who were there. Or when I wear Hinuli Detective, a certain event down in Ybor City, Florida comes to mind, and there's certain people involved that just creates these memories and cherished experiences that carry along with it. I don't have any normal clothes that really have that kind of thing. It's always something that's unique to this fashion in my experience. And there's a couple of quotes that stood out to me when I was doing the research. The creative ambassador at Barney's points out that eccentrics are influential. They help make the world a more interesting place and to step out of comfort zones. And then Iris Apfel, of course, talks about fashion as an item you can buy, but style is something that you possess. And I think that's something that you evolve over time as you understand yourself better. Next slide, please. So personally, it's a move towards confidence, doing it in style, having the support of your partner. She's also in the fashion. She started more recently, and I've been delighted to mentor her and help her get her coordinates together. She's a big fan of Dalby and has a few of her dresses. And also something we learned early on is many people in the outside are in their own personal bubbles and just don't even see. A friend of ours who was very retro oriented had us walk behind her some years ago and watch people not even see that she was in this fancy 50s style outfit. The only person who went up to her was this older lady who came up and complimented her. So that was a wonderful lesson in not worrying so much about what other people think, because most people just don't even notice. When it comes to stereotypes, those rare instances where people do notice and feel like they just have to exalt their opinion, no, it just doesn't really happen. There were a few uncomfortable situations out of dozens of good interactions. At one tea party, a couple of guys in a pickup truck stared at me. A little uncomfortable, but I was headed to my car. I was out of there. At Disney Springs once, we heard a guy just didn't understand why a flock of Lolitas was walking through one of the corridors there. It was pretty funny because one of the people in our group saw him and he wasn't wearing anything very fashionable, so we had a laugh about that. And then a few people online, but understanding how to deal with people online is pretty straightforward these days. Block, done. Don't give them much credit. As for appropriateness, it's not something I personally be aware to wear at work. It's not quite part of the dress code, similar to what Asha would deal with. And also it's pretty floofy and something might get caught in an elevator or what have you. Family gatherings, I've worn it before, no big deal. And certainly with friends, it's quite delightful. I live in an area of town which is pretty laid back and chill. I've worn it to restaurants and everything. We took some friends to lunch in the art museum, had a great time. One lady asked me what country my costume was from. And I said, no, just clothes. It's what I wear. She was like, okay. And that was it. And when it comes to events, use your best judgment. Next slide. A little bit of history captured in various images as to the events, the memories, and yeah, a lot of happiness right there. Yeah.
Okay. Ariel is going to talk a little longer now through kind of her fashion through the ages. And then after that, back to Rambo for some incredibly inspiring people in clothes. I think you'll like both of those things.
Yeah, I'm also going to show inspiring people in clothes. And I just want to call out this one comment that we can answer. We can use the answer, the country of Frolovia, which I thought was pretty great. Yeah, so I'm sort of proto J fashion is what I'm going to be talking about. Its origins in style movements from the 70s, 80s, and 90s that I see as, sort of a continuum through J fashion. I'll just note that I was in my mid-20s in the 90s and living in New York City, working there, when I walked into a Tower Records bookstore and found the first ever issue of Fruits that had, just come out available in the US, although it was all in Japanese. So I feel like I'm a real, like, even though I wouldn't have said that I dressed that way then, like I was aware of it from the beginning of Fruits forward. And just, so it's been really interesting to me at the time to sort of already be making connections between what I saw there, some of which was unrecognizable to me. I was like, I've never seen anyone dressing this way, and other things which I was like, oh yeah, I can see parts of that in things that I've been, noticing in the world. So this is just a little picture of a 70s and 80s and a 90s look, and I'm going to talk about each of those a little bit more. So 70s, you all probably know about this history, but there was all of this obsession both with prairie looks. This is kind of the the waning days of the hippie and back to the land movements, and the show Little House on the Prairie was huge. So all of this calico and petticoats and bonnets and everything, really came into the culture and into the fashion, as well as gunny sacks and other brands that were sort of copying or paying homage to that look and that era. There are also a couple other movies that were really influential, specifically Pretty Baby and Picnic at Hanging Rock, which both featured a lot of Edwardian whites and super romantic style. I always think of the 70s as this kind of backlash toward femininity in the wake of after the counterculture. There was kind of this return to romantic, cottagecore is, obviously this is all kind of cottagecore basically, right? So this, when I was, I remember so well when I was like 8 years old and I had a calico dress with a white flannel petticoat under it, and I just thought like I could die and go to heaven right there. So yeah, and so we see, next slide, we can see in those, you can see the what I think of as the foundation for both Natural and Maury K. Here are some looks from Fruits and other places around those, and you can just obviously see the connection right there. Yeah, gunny sacks. I wore gunny sacks for my bat mitzvah in 1984. I still have it. Definitely could never fit into it. It's teeny, teeny, tiny. But yeah, it was such a big deal. And then in the 80s, obviously, we get into New Wave and New Romantics movements. And one of the things I feel like often gets missed now when people talk about New Wave, it's like all about neon and just asymmetrical haircuts. But there was so much incorporating of vintage style and a real hodgepodge of different looks and silhouettes and beautiful textures and all of these different elements. As well as, of course, the New Romantics having this influence from Goth and Rococo. So yeah, I mean, these looks are great. And you can see in these clearly the precedents for the next slide. Some, great Gothic and elegant Lolita, as well as Dolly K and other styles. I really think I recently have bought like a bunch of pairs of bows, and it's directly influenced by Lena Lovitch, who's there on the left is a new wave goth artist from the early 80s, who's now in her mid 60s and still rocking this exact look and looking fantastic. And then into the 90s, I feel like one thing that gets, maybe, I'm sure this is all pretty familiar to all of you, but I feel like one thing that gets kind of, here I'm just showing a little bit more 80s influence. Molly Ringwald's looks in Pretty in Pink, like just the over the top, like florals on florals on florals, the round glasses, which we all have, coming back now with cottagecore and Maury. All of the vintage jewelry piled on and the pearls and everything else. And there's, of course, Cyndi Lauper in the middle. And I mean, I feel like you can see exactly how these two looks kind of show up in the Dolly K look on the right. And so then one that I feel like gets a little bit overlooked in terms of its influence is Riot Girl and Kinder Whore looks from the early 90s. I was a Riot Girl in the early 90s, and I carried a Sanrio lunchbox. I think it was My Melody. I collected both My Melody and Little Twin Stars at the time, and that was my handbag was just a Sanrio lunchbox. I wore baby barrettes. with combat boots. That was such a look at the time, and also Courtney Love's use of ripped lace and tulle and organdy, and kind of mashing that together with some punk elements was a really big deal. And so in the next slide, you can see there's Courtney Love, and I don't even really know exactly what you would call these two Harajuku styles. But I see, anything that's mixing combat boots with torn, ripped lace and pastels and kind of piled on accessories as being connected in certain ways to, and then like cute decora elements as being connected to the sort of Riot Girl and Kinder looks, which were of course themselves influenced by J fashion of the time, because that was starting to really pop then. And I just wanted to say that when I was at the previous Bay Area con, which was fantastic, I went to an amazing panel on, I think it was on Pink House and Natural K, and it was so good. And one of the things they were saying is they were looking through early, I think they were, I forget which magazines they were looking at, but they're like, oh, there's just so much weird hodgepodge styles in here, and there's like no rules, and everyone's just doing what they want. And I wish we could do that, or like, let's bring that back. And I just feel like, yeah, let's do that. When I first discovered fruits in the 90s, the whole point of it seemed to be like, do whatever you want, like just mix everything together, mash it all up. And that's what attracted me to it. And it's still what attracts me to it. It's why I'm attracted to Dolly K, because you can just kind of like put all the different elements together and explode all the rules and, create something that looks like nothing that anybody else is wearing. And I really feel like, age means needing to be flexible and easy rather than rigid and rule bound. That's been part of what it's meant for me. Like I definitely I've always identified with alternative styles. Again, it was like I was a Riot Girl. I was sort of like in the punk movement, and there were a lot of senses of rules in the same way that I hear about a lot talked about now in Lolita communities. And I feel like part of what it means to be 48 for me is to just like fuck all the rules and do whatever I want and not have it adhere to any particular category. So yeah, here's some more hodgepodge style, some Dolly K looks and some Natural K that I love. Just all the mishmash, secondhand, vintage, unexpected elements, eras, all put in a blender and pulsed to perfection.
Sorry, Pat just stepped on the keyboard.
She knew it was time for the next slide. Yeah.
Like, walking back and forth.
Yeah. So I was just going to talk very briefly about 3 of my style icons who are all older than me, my current style icons, who all of whom I would say are wearing J fashion without knowing it and without saying it. So the first one, and they're right here. So this is Helena Bonham Carter, the actress, and Julie Arkell, who's a textile artist, and Lynn Yeager, who is a fashion critic. So here's the wonderful Helena Bonham Carter. I mean, I just look at these are street style pictures. You can find lots of styled photos of her. And of course, she's really associated with kind of goth and Rococo style because of all her appearances in period films and in Tim Burton's films. But on her own, this is how she dresses all the time now. She's in her early to mid 50s. And I think the middle one, yeah, like that's Maury, right? The one on the left is definitely Maury. I would call the one on the right Dolly. Like, I think you could put any of those in fruits and label them as such, and people would be like, yeah, absolutely. So I just think that's interesting. I actually was led to Dolly. I didn't know that that was a thing. And, I was like 15 years late to it. It was already completely dead, right? But because I was following Helena Bonham Carter's style and so inspired by her, and I saw her tagged as Dolly K. So I was like, oh, cool. Got to go research that. So then the next is Lynn Yeager. She is incredible. She's been writing about fashion since the 90s. And she has also been dressing basically in this silhouette since the 90s. So it's almost always a voluminous skirt with petticoats, flat shoes, a cardigan, this severe red bob, and this doll makeup, which she says is really inspired by kind of 1920s antique dolls. So I always think of this also as kind of Dolly Kay, and sometimes it's sort of dark Maury, depending on where she's going with it. I love the mix of like Fair Isle sweaters with tweeds and organza skirts and everything. And then this is Julie Arkell, and she also, I mean, it's just such a signature style. Like you look at this and I can see an outfit and just think, oh, that's a Julie Arkell look. It's always, almost always these vintage aprons on top of a midi skirt, and the bright colors and pattern mixing, and all these like little barrettes and bows tucked into her hair and pins attached. I mean, she's a textile artist, so she just gets really into textures and patterns. And I think of this as natural K, without, again, she probably would never say that. She's maybe never heard of it, but I imitate these looks when I want to go towards, she's totally everyone's favorite kindergarten teacher in like the best natural K way possible. I agree. And then I just wanted to give a really brief shout out for Maury looks as a wonderful solution for menopause. For those of us who might be dealing with like temperature fluctuation because of hot flashes or things like that, or are just finding our body temperature fluctuating more, layers are so great and also comfy and forgiving. I'm definitely finding that the shape of my body is changing, even when my weight is not necessarily changing. Like the scale doesn't say anything is different, but everything is kind of moving around differently. I have sort of flirted with corsets off and on my whole life, and I may return to them soon, because one thing that happens is your waist just expands over, like in menopause, just happens to everyone by inches. It's like rather crazy. So one thing I found is that Maury is so wonderful for that, because I don't have to worry about whether or not something is going to button the next day. I can just like keep adding more drawstring petticoats and things like that. So especially like during the pandemic, and I live in a very cold climate, unlike these two. I live in Maine. I have loved finding Maury and wear it a lot.
All right, thank you.
Right. So a little bit of my inspirations. Eddie Izzard blew my teenage mind back in the 80s. Seeing some of his comedy in high school, especially his gender fluid nature, and one of his quotes in particular is stuck with me to this day. He's wearing an outfit that really doesn't suit what people would normally think of as his gender. And he says, "They're not women's clothes, they're my clothes. I bought them." For me, that kind of set me on a path, clearly. Since then, she's become more of transgender. In 2019, she was going back and forth in terms of the pronouns, but in 2020, she asked for she and her pronouns in a TV appearance over in the UK. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, hold that slide.
Yep.
I chose these three pictures because it shows a nice evolution in the fashion towards, on the left, gender fluid, and then more into a traditionally feminine kind of look. Okay, next slide, please.
And also, I love how Eddie is aging in these three photos.
Good point. So Grayson Perry is an English observational artist. Often wears women's clothes, and the one that stands out to me here is the left picture. It's called Mother of All Battles. It's a ethnic European style. He's holding a gun. It's embroidered with images of war on it. He was making a political statement at the time for a show in 2002 called Guerrilla Tactics. One critic has called him the social critic from hell, and this confrontational kind of approach that he has, and especially in art circles, makes me happy.
I'm thinking like, what if Lolita did like war print? That would be like so weird.
I do have a military style outfit back here in the closet, but
Yeah,
not to that degree, perhaps.
I also just love like the look of sheer joy and cheer
Yeah,
on their
for
face,
sure.
like in every picture.
Yeah.
next one.
So some people may have seen this gentleman. He's heterosexual. He's in his 60s. He's over in Berlin. He does robotics engineering. A few years back, he decided to start wearing heels, skirts to work. He simply likes to dress this way. He's feeling similar to Eddie Izzard, and he doesn't think clothes should have gender. And the quote that I found from him says, I want people to see me and think about how well dressed I am instead of debating my sexuality. Next, there's one last person I'd like to talk about. Next slide, please.
Ta-da!
Mana-sama. Not much need be said about Mana-sama, but one of the interesting things I found out about Mana-sama from knowing somewhat from other studies about Japanese history, studying geisha arts and things like that, he's interested in framing himself as the ultimate onagata, a male actor who plays female roles in kabuki theater. Once Malice Miser and this kind of iconic look showed up, along with this goal of his, visual K-bands with the onagata style of members increased. So definitely a trendsetter there. More recently, he's gone to a more androgynous style, but this is classic. This is iconic.
Everyone's going off in the chat.
And we had end with
Oh, look at that.
Sama. So here we are. Like, I've loved everybody's comments in the chat so far, and just now we have about a little time for Q&A, and just if you want to go back to any of these many great pictures and discuss them,
go for it. We have a good time, so please do ask questions, talk to us.
And Rambo and I did a twin coordinate today. We're both wearing our lady sloth.
So good.
All right. So let's see, is there anything from earlier on that we can discuss?
When did you go, I'm aware what I want? Somebody just asked. That's a really good question. I mean, and we can each speak to this, but I know that Acha and I both kind of come out of goth punk scenes as younger people. So actually, I started wearing vintage when I was in middle school. So this was the early 80s. And at the time, like very much the kind of Pretty in Pink moment. And at the time, people thought that was really gross. Like nobody was doing that. It was definitely considered pretty out there. And I remember being bullied in my middle school by people saying like, "You wear dead people's clothes. That's disgusting." And at the time, I decided like, okay, I could try to conform to the Jordache jeans and everything, but I can't really afford that anyway, and it's not interesting to me. So I'm just gonna go the other direction and embrace being as weird as humanly possible. And that's never served me poorly from then on. So I've kind of like lifelong been a freak, and I've definitely had the pressure to conform in certain moments. When I had my first kid, and I was, or even when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, I guess I have to wear maternity clothing now. Or when I started my first job in academia. And so I've had these moments where like suddenly there are Banana Republic blazers or whatever that show up in my closet. And then I kind of like reset myself and be like, what am I doing? And go back to wearing like 1950s crinolines and combat boots or whatever.
I think for me, I'm still kind of finding that. I don't know why I'm so shy about like being out in public in different things, but like in the 90s, I was in Atlanta and took part in the goth scene and was perfectly fine. So I think that internally it was like more of a time, place, situation sort of deal. And so then, like, I was in grad school and broke and, buying my maternity clothes from Goodwill and like the Walmart men's section. And then later, like finally making some money, I realized that, oh God, working in the military as I do, I absolutely can't wear goth. Like that's just not something I can do. So I have this, hi Kat, I have this great like wardrobe of stuff that I wear, like, I try to wear like twice a week. So anyway, and
For me, I can see, thinking back, hints of it in college, but mainly from the masculine perspective. Started wearing kilts, and there's a certain kind of fancy pant, not quite the MC Hammer pant, but there was a certain kind of pant that had a tie down at the ankle that were super comfortable, and I just love those. They were very expressive. More to this style started through, I think, a few Halloween costumes, and then I found a certain look that I enjoyed mid to late 90s. Part of it came through with the belly dancing, the tribal dance. There's a skirt and pants kind of look to it that evolved through the natural progression of doing that style. And then full Lolita 2014 or so.
There was another question about what we would like to see brands. Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah. Be more size inclusive, but actually also more shape inclusive. Like that's something my friend Marianne, the Rotund, on various social media is trying to combat, is this sense that you have to be a certain shape in order to even purchase fashion. So A-line dresses, but maybe taking into account, like for my kid, they find it difficult to find a good enough armhole aperture. It like really like constrains them, and it's so like uncomfortable. And so like things that are inclusive of different kinds of body shapes, be it arms, be it like a larger waist than hip, or vice versa, like different shapes, being inclusive in that way.
One of my pet peeves is size inclusive brands that say that they like cater to larger bust sizes, and then they go up to like 40 inches or something like that. I've breastfed 2 children. I am currently an H cup. It's not going backwards. And I can't find anything fitted to save my life that would fit in my bust. So that is a big one for me. And also just things that are a little bit more forgiving. Like I love a snatched waist and everything as much as the next person. And I love a corset look and all of that. But I've been really paying attention to historic period films where they show people in corsets and stays that are loose tied instead of, what do they say? Like instead of tight laced, loose laced or undone. I love that look. And I would like to try to find something that, it's just a little more comfortable. And also we're running around picking up kids from school and hopping in and out of cars and running to the office. And we need to be able to move.
Yeah. For me, I would say sleeve length has been my biggest challenge. And like you say, Asha, the armholes. This blouse that I'm wearing right now is just a little bit tight here, which when I have them custom, which is an added expense and difficulty finding the right shops and everything, can work itself out. But even when I check the measurements and I'm careful to add a little bit and what have you, sometimes even then it feels like they always pull up, and it's an ongoing challenge to find just the right circumstances. To that end, I found a local seamstress or two that's been able to help out. So having that local contact has paid off.
Definitely.
You have to share who that is.
Sure.
All right. Do you feel that dressing in Lolita changes the type of ageism you might experience out in public?
I was going to say something about the quote that Rambo said earlier from Simon Doonan, I think, about eccentrics. Like, I really feel like we need eccentric. People actually appreciate eccentricity in the world because it shows them what's possible. It gives them permission. It's like adds some color and life to the world. And I feel like that's mostly what I get. Like, it's really interesting for me to walk up to like a group of moms at pickup at school, and they're all wearing jeans and t-shirts, and then I show up and they all are kind of like, oh yeah, like I have some interesting clothes that I wore once that I might like to break out again. So I think we were talking about this before, but I think maybe we get a little bit more, we seem a little bit more, it's interesting because we're all at middle age. I think once you get to be really genuinely elderly, then it's seen as very cute to be an eccentric. I don't think we're old enough yet to be considered like cute in that way. We're sort of in a weird in-between space. But I do think people are like, oh, that's interesting in a different way than when they see it on someone who is, young looking.
I just hide. I hide from the PTA moms.
Yeah, and as we were discussing that, and this may be also gender related, but with age, I think older people are less likely to be harassed in the sense that younger people are. It may be a barrier to somebody coming up and giving a person a hard time just because of what they're wearing.
I definitely don't think people come up and try to touch me the same way they would have when I was 22.
Yeah.
Which I did get when I was 22, wearing like punk or Riot Girl or whatever. That doesn't happen anymore.
Yes, thank God. All right. Do you feel that your interests in certain substyles of Lolita have changed over time or been affected by your age or people's perception of it? No, not for me. I mean, I've always loved the Gothic. I love old school still, so thank God it's coming back as something kind of cool and retro. Yeah. So either of you?
I started out classic and knew I'd branch into Gothic, a little bit of military. I was less inclined to explore sweet until Fluffy Tory came out with Sweet Chocolate Journey, and that made me very happy. And I think that and Honey Cake and one other are the three kind of dips I've made into that environment. Yeah, there we go.
Honey Cake right there. Yeah,
yeah, that's it. There, but I want Tea Time kind of, kind of spans the chasm for me, so to speak. But no, I don't think age has changed that. I'm not going to sell off any of my outfits as I grow older, I don't think.
It has changed somewhat for me. I mean, again, like I wore a lot of Sanrio in the early 90s when I was in my 20s, and I don't wear that stuff anymore. I guess I just feel like I've sort of learned to embrace like my natural asset, so to speak. Like I have this crazy hair, like I have this kind of lush body. Like I feel like it goes well with like this more romantic kind of cottagecore and Dolly K look than it does to do a kind of more Decora inspired thing, which I used to actually do when I was younger.
Is there anything you're hoping people in the fashion will start wearing again? Anything you miss seeing more people wear? Oh man, I would love Winona Ryder from Beetlejuice style, like the full-on like Gothic wedding / funeral wonderfulness in that movie.
I wore that then.
Exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember that I wore that to like a school function. I wore like a big black straw hat, and I was just like, I dare you to fuck with me. I was like in 9th grade.
Love it.
I have that as part of my Plague Doctor. That
Ooh, nice.
Oh yeah,
we're also we can twin now.
Nice. I mean, I just want to see more of what I saw in those early days of Fruits where it wasn't even categorizable. Like, I just like seeing something where I'm like, I don't even know what you call that. I've never seen anyone dressed like that before. Like, that's what I'm most inspired by. Is, I mean, I love seeing beautiful Lolita looks and, you know, sort of perfect Maury looks, but I get really excited when I see something that looks like nothing else I've ever seen.
Mm. Okay, so we have, okay. What are some things you're looking forward to for J Fashion in the future? Doesn't matter how silly it may be.
I love interesting and bizarre prints. I got Puppet Maker, I believe, recently, and that is just making me utterly tickled to find. That actually might be the one I wear to a photo shoot at the goth shop that Asha was talking about earlier. I don't think I have a picture of it yet, but
do you not? Okay.
Yeah, it just makes me perfectly happy. Anything that would stand out and cause people to kind of do a double take. The Henley dress there, The Story You Don't Know is a big one of those. Things like that. Just bring it on. I'd be perfectly happy in that environment.
Go ahead.
Nope, go ahead.
I am really excited by, I feel like at the beginning of Lolita and Harajuku fashion in general, you know, it was that I remember like from the 90s and still sometimes to this day, it's like almost a cartoon, like a very anime, you know, influenced version of the look. And now I feel like there are more brands doing something that's closer to historic fashion, like actual historic period clothing or ethnic or folk clothing, and that's really exciting to me as a lifelong collector of vintage and antique clothes. I really want, since I was a little girl, one of those gigantic, stiff, starched cotton Victorian white bows that you wear on top of your head or on back of your head, like bigger than these, bigger than like any of the brand bows that I want. And I can't find it anywhere. Like I've been on Etsy, I've been on all the things. Like it needs to be this big, you know, like I can't get through a door. I'm sorry?
Surely Claire's has that.
No, I mean, it would have to be like a starched fabric sewn bow. So it's actually takes some effort to make. And it's historic, you know, it's actual, like you can see it in photographs from the late 1800s. And I am excited for brands to kind of keep bringing that stuff back.
Claire's is awesome. So for me, I have thought of something. So I am half Thai, and I've noticed more Thai Lolita makers. But you were talking, Ariel, about like folk dress from, you know, Europe, and it would be interesting to me to see like the Thai take on, you know, Wa or Kui.
Oh wow!
I think how to pronounce that. I do apologize. Ji Lolita. So. Like a Thai traditional dress sometimes has the one shoulder going down to a very tightly fitting sort of skirt. So it would be very interesting to see if Thai people could somehow incorporate Thai traditional dress into Lolita.
Yeah, I've seen so much like cross influence. I've been really interested in folk clothing recently, and I have an antique Vietnamese minority skirt that's like so full and pleated and really like the poof is incredible on it, and it's just the traditional skirt. They just used massive amounts of fabric and like micro pleated it to have that silhouette. It's great.
Alrighty, so is there a style that you want to try? Where do you think your style journey will be in 10 years? Ooh. So Rambo, you'll be 62, and two of us will be 58. Deep into menopause by then, thank God.
I think,
yeah.
I think for me at least, it would be pretty much the same, maybe a little bit more on the military side. There's some things I've been kicking around that I'd like to consider with that. But classic and gothic are certainly where my heart is. And like I said, the odd prints. I haven't seen much in the way of sweet that's been grabbing my attention lately. I just got a wonderful card print from Innocent World that I'm looking forward to wearing to a poker night soon.
Oh, cool.
There we go. Okay. Well, those pictures of Lynn Yeager, I just keep coming back to her and like Julie Arkel. Like, I love that these women have such a honed signature style that you can look at an outfit and immediately think like, oh, that's her. And I don't know anybody else who dresses like that. And so actually for me, I just want to keep refining it and kind of purging my closet to a point where every single item I own, matches together to make like the exact aesthetic that I'm going for. And I'm not there yet. Like, I've been kind of all over the map over the decades, and I still own clothes that I had when I was 21. Like, I love my clothing so much, and I treasure it, so I keep it. But definitely not all of it works anymore. I mean, I get rid of things too, but I just want to get to the point where like every day I go into my closet and I can just take out an outfit that feels exactly like me, which I think will always be a kind of Dolly K, Maury, somewhere in that spectrum.
I'm trying to figure out a way to get rid of petticoats in the future, because it is hot as heck here in Florida, and I do not understand how to wear them and not like sweat buckets. I love petticoats, don't get me wrong.
I have some tips for you.
Oh, maybe a hoop skirt. Oh, yeah. That would be good.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. I always wear a hoop, light petticoat on top, bloomers off.
There we go. Yep. Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, again, I am kind of new in the fashion, like 2 years old in it, so.
Yeah. The bonus is it sets off a metal detector at Disney, and then you get freedom frisk.
Really?
Yeah, personal experience.
But I think I really love, I saw Bread in here showing up in the chat, and I love the EGA style. I miss that panel because I was like too busy fretting over this panel, but I would like to move in that direction simply because I just love the elegance of it. And I think in my 60s, I would really like kick ass in like an elegant style.
Totally. There are gorgeous things shown in that panel, you'll see. Yeah, I just feel like I'm edging ever closer to looking like I walked out of a fairy tale. And as I get closer to being a crone, like the more appropriate that seems, right?
That's right. Yep, we're moving through the mother stage and deep into crone. Okay, anything else? I think we're hitting up on our limit shortly here.
Obviously, we talked all about aging, but I do want to give a shout out to all the young folks in the community who I follow so many people, and they really do inspire me. And, I'm thrilled to see what young people, what the most active members of the community who are always younger people are doing with their looks. And I learn from you. I watch the YouTubes. I'm on the Instagram with all of it. It's very important. And then, the few moments when it stands out that somebody older is wearing the fashion is thrilling because it is so rare.
All right. What do you think about the concept of aging gracefully as people talk about it in the media? I think it's kind of bullshit, and it's attempting to sell you things.
There's also an aspect of pushing them into the background.
Yep.
Just be in the corner, be quiet. We're busy here taking over the world, you oldsters. That doesn't sit
ungracefully.
Outrageously. I'd say aging outrageously.
Aggressively.
You earn this through your years and life experience to get to do whatever the fuck you want. And, there is freedom in kind of getting to this point in our careers and our life stages. And fuck gracefully. I mean, I also really decided a long time ago, like, I'm never going to look graceful. I was a punk. Like, I'm not interested in graceful.
Yes, be old, look old, and everyone can just accept it.
And sometimes that means just not doing the things that everybody else is doing. Like I plan to have my hair get longer and longer and longer as I get older because I love how old women look with really long hair. And because there's this pressure to cut your hair, the older you get, it seems to get shorter and shorter. So I've been growing, my hair has gotten progressively longer since I've turned 30.
I'm letting my natural white show, so maybe I'll change my Instagram name to like Old Gray Bangs or something like that.
I took up dance in my 30s. I'm probably going to find something else interesting to do at some point and just continue putting myself out there in various ways.
And if you look around, the old people doing amazing things are everywhere. We go out dancing before the pandemic. We would go out dancing a lot, and we would be, and we're in our late 40s, and we would be out danced every single time at this club we would go to by people in their 50s and 60s and 70s. And like, that's who we notice. We just see those people and we're like, that's where we're headed. That's who we're going to be someday. There's one more thing, I think.
Yeah. Is there an aspect from your life outside Lolita that influences your life within Lolita? Like, I'm an accountant and I love looking like a Lolita accountant.
Oh, that's great.
Really awesome. Man, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love twinning with my kid.
That's great.
My kids are both into J fashion too, and that's so much fun. And they can fit into all the things that I can't fit into from Japanese brands. So if I buy something and it gets shipped over here and there's no way in hell it's going to fit me, even though it sounded like it did, I just give it to my kid. And if it's her, great. And I'm like, fantastic, totally works. But I was going to say that I've gotten really interested in, as I was saying, like folk and peasant wear from Eastern Europe specifically, which is a big part of Dali K. But like, that's actually my ancestry as an Ashkenazi Jew. Romania, Poland, the Ukraine, that's where my people were from just a couple generations ago. And so I've gotten really interested in how I can pull those looks back into my looks now as a way of connecting with my heritage.
Not that I can think of for the fashion itself, but I get really anal-retentive and organized whenever I'm passionate about something, and I have this big old spreadsheet of doom that has all of my coordinates and current orders and sizes and all this kind of stuff that mirrors a lot of things I do at work. So that's probably where it blends in.
That's awesome. Oh, thanks for sharing our Instagrams. Yes, please follow us. I love following everybody and seeing everyone's amazing style.
Yeah, and I love these cons. I live in Maine and we don't have anything like this, and it's been a huge silver lining of the pandemic that there have been these online events, because I would not have been able to connect with community if it were not for things like this.
Sure.
Wow, I guess we'll just wrap it all up now. We're coming up on 2 minutes left. So I appreciate everyone for the community here. Again, I started watching the Bay Area K panels like a couple cons ago, and just absolutely love the sense of community in the comments in these panels, and everyone sharing on the Discord, although I'm like barely there because I can't keep up. But it's just awesome to go through and laugh.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. All, whatever age you are all aging with us.
Yay, and you can keep wearing the crazy shit you wear forever. We're here to tell you that.
Right.
Use the time, build your wardrobe.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Good seeing you all. Have fun out there.
All right.